it's critical that we ask good questions, and it's critical that we listen, because we're not trying to perfect our ask in such a way that makes people give to us. We want to understand their passion. We want to understand how that desire to change the world related to that passion could be impacted through our nonprofit, and invite them to join us. Welcome to the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast. Whether you are a seasoned professional or a first-time fundraiser, we have the advice you need to take your next step toward major gift mastery. I'm your host, Tom Dauber, President of Abundant Vision Philanthropic Consulting. So every week, I thank my audience, you guys, my listeners, for joining me on a journey to major gift mastery. Well, that begs a question. What does Tom consider major gift mastery to be? Does it mean 100% close rate? Does it mean always raising at least $1 million each year? What is major gift mastery? Well, first off, let me say those sorts of things, your close rate, how much money you raise in a given year, those are always going to vary greatly from organization to organization based on what your fundraising goals are. And so that isn't the place we want to go, because someone who is truly has mastery in soliciting major gifts can be successful at any level. Now, they may not be able to raise the same amount of money at a small organization as they would at a large organization, but they're going to be successful anywhere. And my goal for all of you is that you would be that sort of person. So I've thought a bit about it, and I guess it comes down to 7 things. One, and most importantly, it's knowing how to talk about your nonprofit, communicating an abundant vision that inspires philanthropy. Vision is everything when it comes to fundraising. I've shared this before on the podcast and on LinkedIn, lots of other places. It's so critical that you, as a fundraising professional, as a nonprofit leader, know how to talk about your nonprofit in a way that inspires philanthropy. I'll never forget, and this just happened, but it made an impression. A young man that I used to mentor in a nonprofit that I worked at 20 some years ago, he has now started his own nonprofit. And the poor guy doesn't know a thing about fundraising. I love you if you're listening, but he has a lot to learn. And I showed up at this networking kind of workshop on fundraising, and he was there, and I'm like, well, what are you doing here? And explained it all to me. And so I invited him out to just a chat. And so he shared with me what he was doing. And then I started to talk with him, pretending I was him, about the impact his organization was making and why it should matter to his constituents. And I was able to do it to the extent that I think both of us got choked up a little bit. I know I was. And I think I surprised him with how compelling his vision for his organization could be. But that's a key part of major gift mastery, is knowing how to talk about a nonprofit's mission in a way that inspires philanthropy, right? You've got to have an abundant vision. So that's number 1. Number 2, it's knowing how to engage a donor to understand their giving motivations. And that's listening. There are some folks out there, especially people outside of the profession of fundraising, who think that what we're doing is arm twisting, or we're using relational pressure somehow. Well, your vice president gave, or your CEO gave, and so you better give too, or else he's not going to, think strongly of you. I actually was insulted pretty harshly once in my early days in higher ed. Someone saw I was coming from a faith-based background in my fundraising experience. And they said, "Oh, I guess you won't be able to scare people with hell anymore to make them give." So insulting. And it was from someone pretty high up above me too on the org chart. But that isn't what fundraising is. Whether it's a religious context or a secular context, when we're listening to a donor, when we're meeting with the donor, that is, we should be listening to them. We should be asking them probing questions, important questions, appropriate questions. And sometimes those questions need to be preceded by a request to ask an audacious question or an important question. And more often than not, they're going to say, "Well, sure, you can ask me a question." And so that's when you ask them a question that might reveal what they really care about, what organizations they support, what change they would most like to affect in the world, or why an experience with a particular nonprofit or with a particular school or training experience, um, why those made a difference to them, or what does it mean to them that they can be part of the profession that they now practice. Those sorts of questions are so key because it helps you understand what they care about. And sometimes you're going to find that they don't care about your organization. In those cases, sometimes the best thing you can do is help connect them to another organization that they're going to really care about. And I'll tell you, if you do that, you're going to have a ton of credibility with them down the road. And so when you do have a project they care about, you're going to be much more likely to get an audience. And I'm betting they'll probably even give you something. So don't be afraid of that. But when we're meeting with donors, it's critical that we ask good questions and it's critical that we listen because we're not trying to perfect our ask in such a way that makes people give to us. We want to understand their passion. We want to understand how that desire to change the world related to that passion could be impacted through our nonprofit and invite them to join us. Really good example. And I think I might have told this story before in other contexts, but there was a dentist once. And when I met with him, he spent most of his time complaining to me about the school. This guy was passionate about working with the latest technology. And the dental school he graduated from didn't like to use technology that didn't have 15 years of clinical research behind it, if not more. And so he knew I was a fundraiser. He knew what I was out to do. He took that opportunity, I think initially to try to explain to me why he would never give, right? Because he didn't get trained in the latest technology like he could have. And he feels like we're doing wrong by our students by not doing that, right? Well, at the end of an hour of him explaining that to me, because I was listening, because I could see how passionate he was about technology, I invited him to be a partner to the organization, to change it, to help do some things through philanthropy and through some influence and some connection to help his alma mater do better for our current students than we did for him. And he took us up on that. And this young man, well, he's not young now. He's my age, so he's 48. But at the time, he was my age, and I was in my late 20s. And so this fella in his late 20s agreed to a $40,000 gift. And that's with having considerable dental school debt and considerable business practice purchase debt. So this guy had, 7-figure debt and still was able to make a $40,000 gift. Not because I was so slick, not because I was so polished, not because I twisted his arm or used relational pressure somehow, or even with his peers, right? It was because I cared about what he cared about, and I showed him how he could affect change in the areas he cared about by making a gift. It was that simple. And he went on to make additional gifts. But knowing how to engage a donor to understand their giving motivations and invite them to join you is critical. Tom Dauber here for Abundant Vision Academy. Are you a nonprofit leader who's new to fundraising? Are you feeling crushed by your fundraising goals and not sure how to find success? My online class, crafted from my 25 years of experience and more than 5,000 donor meetings, Abundant Vision Academy will give you the confidence and understanding you need to start building relationships with donors and having gift discussions in just 110 minutes. You'll get 14 videos covering all the topics you need to find success in fundraising. You can take it at your own pace and can watch as many times as you'd like. This is one of the best deals in fundraising continuing education you can get today. To make sure you get off to a strong start in 2024, I'm offering a 50% discount to anyone signing up for my course this spring. That's a $375 value. Enter the coupon code SPRING2024 at checkout to claim your 50% discount. That's SPRING 2024. Head on over to thomas-dauber-s-school.teachable.com and click on Abundant Vision Academy to get your discount today. The link is in the podcast description. And then there's some disciplines that go with major gift mastery. Point 3 has 4 subpoints. A is developing evidence-based goals. You're not just pulling goals out of the air. You're not just saying, well, whatever it is that we need for our operations budget next year, well, that's our goal, right? No, you need to sit down and think through, well, how many gifts are you going to ask? What are reasonable amounts to ask for based on what you know about the constituents? There's a lot of different types of goals that you can focus on there. But that's an important part of mastering major gifts, right? Is knowing what you're shooting for in a major gift program. B is building a portfolio of relationships to manage. C is developing strategies for each of these relationships. And D is contacting donors to request meetings. These are disciplines. These are things that are all done with intentionality, and it is a learned skill. Knowing how to do all the things that you need to do to request a meeting, and to become disciplined in saying, I'm going to make X number of calls every week to make sure that my calendar's filled up with appointments. That's a discipline, and that can be learned, right? Learning about how to develop strategies for each relationship, that's also a discipline. Taking the time to think about the person, to think about your organization, and how you might move them from where they're at to a place of deeper engagement. That's also a discipline. And building that portfolio of relationships to manage, right? Qualifying donors by meeting with them and understanding their affinity and their capacity. Also a discipline, something that can be learned, right? And again, there's ways that you can learn how to develop evidence-based goals. Number 4 is understanding how to facilitate strategic conversations with donors to understand their values, goals, and invite them to partner with you in making change in the world through giving, right? So this ties closely into number 2, right? So if you understand their motivations, well then you need to figure out, how do I continue this conversation in such a way that once I understand their values, that you can invite them to partner to make a change in the world through giving, right? And then part 5 would be developing a courageous confidence in your ability to invite donors to support your cause. Again, this is a thing that can be learned. This is a thing that does take some practice, right? So the more times that you put yourself out there talking to people about what you do and why it matters in the world, the more time you spend really thinking through the impact your organization is making, the more confident you're going to be in your abilities. Because I've solicited lots of people, maybe 1,000. I've kind of lost track, right? It isn't hard for me to do because I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm not worried if someone's going to say no to me, because I know that just means I'm one step further to finding someone who will say yes, right? Maybe it isn't that person, and that's fine. We bless and release those people. But this all takes discipline, and it takes work ethic. And the more you can do it, the better you're going to be as a fundraiser. And then number 6 is understanding how differing giving vehicles can impact your donor and impact your organization. So, what I mean is this: if you're talking with someone, they're going to assume that you want cash. And if they're cash poor, you're probably not going to get much of a gift, if any. But a key rule in fundraising is you want to ask people for things that they have a lot of. If it's cash, then ask for cash. But maybe it's acreage. Maybe they have lots of acreage. And maybe their kids don't want to farm anymore. Or maybe they have lots of closely held stock in their private company that's going to, be sold in the near future. Maybe they've got a Rembrandt up on the wall. I don't know. It could be anything. One of the most common ways that you can get a larger gift, though, is through estate giving. Now, I know a lot of people get really weirded out talking to people about their estates because you're obviously talking about death, right? Well, when you die, would you leave us that money? This is another thing where you need to develop a sense of confidence by beginning to have these conversations. And remember, if you're uncomfortable talking about these things, just be transparent about it. You can say, hey, there's something I'd like to ask you. I'm a little nervous about it because I don't typically talk to people about this sort of thing, but may I ask you? They're going to say yes to that question. They're not going to be offended. There are certainly ways, and there are ways that I can teach you about how to bring up the subject of estate giving. I'd encourage you to think hard about estate giving too, because even a person who's not typically considered a major gift prospect, they probably own a home. And if they're like most boomers, or even a generation past that, their home's probably appreciated quite a bit, and maybe it's even paid off. Now, maybe they're leaving it to their kids, but maybe not. Maybe it's going to be sold. And when it's going to be sold, maybe a percentage of that might go to your organization. But again, maybe you have some fears about bringing up such a sensitive topic. Remember, this is probably a person, if you're talking with them about an estate gift, that's been giving to your organization for some time. And it's a fair question to ask them, what's going to happen to your support for your organization when you're gone? Would you like to see it continue? Could we have a conversation about how we might be able to do that? You see, when you pose questions as hypotheticals, when you ask permission to make an ask, it's so less threatening, and it really lowers the temperature on the conversation, and hopefully will help both of you feel more comfortable. And that's a key thing in major gift conversations. Everybody should be comfortable. No one should ever be surprised. We're not sneaking up on people or ambushing them, right? We're communicating our intentions, letting people know who we are. But again, that's the sort of thing that takes practice. So, number 7, and this is one of the most important things you can do as a fundraiser, and has nothing to do with asking for a gift. Someone who's developed major gift mastery can communicate powerfully the impact that a donor's giving has made. This is one of the most important things that you can do as a fundraiser because it reinforces the positive feelings associated with giving. So, if you have someone that's given to you, the best thing you can do is to spend some time with them, helping them understand how wonderful their gift was, how much it was appreciated, and to bring to them evidence of how it's made a difference in the life of whoever you're benefiting. A video with a firsthand testimony is one of the best things you can do. You could even have them come and meet one of the people your organization helps. You want to get them as close to that as you possibly can. And if you do it well, the likelihood of them giving again is so high. It really increases that. so many organizations aren't taking the time to properly thank their donors and properly communicate impact. So if you can distinguish yourself as one of the ones that does, your donors are going to be so grateful. And that's even without large staffs to, do lots of fancy productions and videos and things like that. You don't need to do that. You've got an iPhone, you've got an Android, take some videos of something and send it to them. Just like you would maybe your parents or another relative you love if there's something important happening in your family. Look, here's a video of Johnny's first home run. Thanks for buying him the shoes, right? His baseball cleats. Whatever it is, that loved family member doesn't care that it wasn't a professional production, and your donors won't either. It's about the emotion of the thing, not the glitz and the glamour and the high value production that your organization probably can't afford anyway. So these are 7 of the most important things that I think go into what I would call major gift mastery. Now, there are others, and I'm sure you could, the people listening are going to be saying, well, what about this? And what about that? Well, if there's some things I left out, add them in the comments. Be happy to talk about those as well. Fundraising has a lot to it. And anytime you try to distill it down to this or that, it's easy to miss out on a point here or there. But if you have these 7 things nailed down, you're going to have a lot higher chance of success as a fundraiser. As always, I'm your host, Tom Dauber. Thank you for joining me as we journey together toward major gift mastery on the Abundant Vision Fundraising Podcast.